Meet Issei, a sad, lonely gooner who finally lands his first date, only to get instantly deleted and left for dead. But the plot armor kicks in when a literal demon mommy resurrects him, buffing his stats so he can clap cheeks and crack skulls. Which all starts at a former all-girls school where our MC and his equally down-bad homies enroll, fully thinking they're about to speedrun the harem route. But in reality, these NPCs are hard stuck at the bottom of the food chain, reduced to peeking into the locker room just to see some plot. And as the boys cry about their supreme skill issue, Issei spots RIZZ, the absolute peak president of the occult research club, feeling instantly drawn to her for zero logical reason. Until later, while walking home like a total background character, a wild baddie named Yuma spawns in to ask him out, and because Delulu is the Solulu, this desperate simp instantly says yes. So the very next day, Issei and Yuma actually touch grass and go on their first date together, where things seem to be going flawlessly as they hit the shops and grab food, leading Issei to catch a glimpse of Yuma's massive mommy milkers, making him literally choke on his drink. And after dinner, our boy finally works up the nerve to hold her hand, thinking life literally cannot get any better. Just as Yuma asks for one last tiny favor, prompting Issei to pucker up for a kiss like an absolute clown, only for her to suddenly ask him to die, which leaves Issei standing there wondering if this is just some spicy new degradation kink. But suddenly, her outfit straight up obliterates itself as she transforms into a fallen angel and yeets a glowing spear straight through his chest. She brutally drops the law that his mere existence is a threat to her squad because God planted a glitchy op weapon right inside his body. And as she dips out of the server, Issei's HP rapidly hits 0. Yet all this absolute degenerate can think about is RIZZ, making a final wish that his next respawn ends at the hands of a top-tier waifu like her. When suddenly, RIZZ actually materializes out of nowhere, declaring she's taking him and making him her personal slave. Waking up the next morning, Issei copes by thinking it was just a spicy nightmare. But upon loading into school, he realizes everyone's memories of Yuma have been completely wiped. So he frantically checks his phone for her digits, only to find that his contact list has been totally scrubbed, forcing him to goon over animated baddies with his bros after class, while slowly realizing his dream is giving off major red flags. And it gets weirder when his friends turn off the lights to get freaky, because Issei suddenly realizes his vision is perfectly clear in the pitch dark. Heading home, he starts testing out these newly patched-in vampire stats, leading him back to the exact spawn point where Yuma packed him up, and while he's busy doubting his own sanity, a fallen angel named Donosik abruptly drops into the lobby, causing Issei to violently dodge backwards, completely stunned by his own insane agility. As he tries to sprint away, only to look up and realize Donosik is literally hovering over him in creative mode. Suddenly, this flying bozo blocks his path, claiming Issei must be a stray devil since he's wandering around without a master or a guild, and immediately summons his own glowing spear to impale our boy, who tries pulling the weapon out but takes massive burn damage just from touching it. Donosik then casually explains that holy light is basically kryptonite to Issei's new race, aiming to permanently delete his account. But his attack gets completely countered the moment RIZZ teleports onto the scene, aggressively telling this NPC to back the hell off. Though Donosik hits the "I pretend I do not see it" button and attacks anyway, only to get blocked by two of her elite familiars. Realizing she's rocking that iconic crimson hair, Donosik finally figures out she's from the Op Gremory family, telling her to leash her pets before tactically retreating, while RIZZ rushes to revive Issei yet again. The next day, Issei boots up from his sleep completely butt naked, instantly tweaking out when he sees RIZZ lying right next to him without a stitch of clothing. Completely flabbergasted, he assumes the simulation is glitching. But RIZZ drops the bomb that everything was 100% real, officially revealing herself as a high-tier devil and his brand new master. And just then, his mom yells from the hallway, stomping up to his room to wake him for school, throwing Issei into an absolute panic. Until she bursts through the door, catches them in a highly questionable baby-making pose, hits the "this is fine" vibe, softly closes the door and runs to tell his dad. Hearing this, Issei mentally blue screens, wondering how the hell he's gonna explain having a naked 10 out of 10 in his bed on a Tuesday. And while he scrambles his brain cells trying to remember how he got here, RIZZ just laughs and says his family passes the vibe check, prompting Issei to look up and realize her heavy artillery is fully exposed, though RIZZ just hits him with the ultimate green flag and says he can stare as long as he wants. But the second his monkey brain decides it's time to touch, RIZZ casually gets dressed, shifting the topic to ask if his stab wound is still acting up, making Issei absolutely baffled as to how she knows about his so-called dream, until she reminds him it wasn't a dream at all, explaining that he fully regened his HP because she spent the entire night pumping her magic into him. Taking that way out of context, Issei totally freaks out. But RIZZ instantly hits the brakes, assuring him that her V-card remains securely in her inventory, before stating that the world is loaded with hidden lore. And when Issei asks what she meant by the whole devil thing, RIZZ doubles down, confirming she is indeed a demon and he is officially her property. Later on, the duo flexes by strolling into school together, pulling max aggro from the student body as everyone wonders how a bottom-tier scrub bagged the school's ultimate idol. And shortly after, RIZZ mentions she'll send someone to fetch him later. But the moment she walks away, Matsuda catches him lacking and throws a wild haymaker for committing treason against the Brotherhood of Losers. Luckily, Motohama acts as the voice of reason, suggesting they at least interrogate the traitor first. So Matsuda demands to know what actually went down. And Issei, with zero hesitation, claims he spent the entire night playing with massive melons. Meanwhile, RIZZ bumps into Sona, who throws a little shade, saying it's pretty off-brand for her to recruit such a clown into her guild. But RIZZ just shrugs, claiming she basically just adopted a goofy little brother. Cut to class, where the ultimate pretty boy Yuto casually walks in, making all the girls immediately flood their basements while Issei seethes with pure jealousy, as Yuto steps right up to our boy, dropping the message that RIZZ sent him. And when he asks Issei to follow, the girls start stressing that their flawless prince might catch a terminal disease from the school creep. Shortly after, they arrive at a spooky, candlelit abandoned building, where Yuto introduces a tiny powerhouse named Koniko as the club's freshman bruiser. And naturally, Issei instantly scans her proportions, getting insanely hyped about his new club life, until he hears the glorious sound of running water, completely losing his mind the second he realizes RIZZ is currently in the shower. But his peak Gooner moment gets interrupted by Akino, who smoothly points out that he's radiating massive creep energy, before striding over to formally introduce herself as the club's vice president. And while Issei is busy malfunctioning over the sheer luck of being in a room with two S-tier baddies, RIZZ steps out of the shower and casually apologizes for crashing in his bed. Getting down to business, she exposes the occult research club as a total front, dropping the bomb that every single member is actually a devil. She also fills him in on the guy who tried to pack him up, explaining he's a fallen angel, basically an ex-heavenly mod who got permabanned to the underworld for toxic behavior, and goes on to explain that ever since the Middle Ages, there's been a massive turf war down there, made even worse by regular angels who farm devils for God's XP. Basically, it's a chaotic three-way free-for-all, which completely overloads Issei's single brain cell, forcing him to admit that this lore dump is way too complex for a smooth brain like him. So RIZZ grounds the conversation by bringing up his disastrous date with Yuma. And when Issei tries to cope by denying it, she pulls out the receipts, a literal photo of him and Yuma together. Shook to his core, Issei asks how she bypassed his privacy settings, prompting RIZZ to reveal that Yuma runs with the exact same squad that jumped him last night, causing Issei to argue that his homies don't even remember her and she's totally wiped from his contacts. But RIZZ shuts that down, explaining Yuma simply used mind-wipe hacks, the exact same trick she used on his parents earlier that morning. When she adds that Yuma deleted her digital footprint after completing her hit job, Issei is left wondering why he was targeted in the first place. So RIZZ spills the tea, saying Yuma sent him to the Shadow Realm because he's harboring a highly illegal sacred gear inside him. This sacred gear is basically a glitched passive buff found in certain humans, and both devils and fallen angels are absolutely terrified of its potential, leading RIZZ to instruct Issei to raise his hand and visualize the absolute strongest entity he can think of. But our boy panics, claiming it's way too much pressure. And as she tells him to focus, Issei's eyes lock onto her massive heaven's gates, completely zeroing out his concentration. Eventually, he just taps out, forcing RIZZ to sigh and agree they'll just have to grind his stats slowly. Though Issei still has his doubts, RIZZ stands firm that the fallen angels only tried to spawn kill him out of pure fear of his hidden power. And when the confused simp asks how he even managed to respawn, RIZZ explains he accidentally activated a magical flyer moments before biting the dust, ultimately confirming that he's been officially reincarnated as a pawn for a top-tier devil family. Fast forward to Issei running errands, quickly realizing his human stats are fully gone since he now has night vision and can literally spawn bat wings. Recalling RIZZ's lecture on how devils farm power by signing contracts with humans for some sweet compensation. But instead of drawing old-school pentagrams, modern devils just spam magic flyers like they're promoting a SoundCloud mix. While Issei bags up the flyers like a minimum wage worker, RIZZ notes that familiars usually do this grunt work. But since he's literally level 1, he's got to grind the tutorial missions first, before seductively whispering that if he levels up enough, he might even unlock his own personal servants one day. Fired up to the max, Issei asks if these servants will still obey him even if he demands some incredibly degenerate stuff, and RIZZ casually confirms they absolutely have to, which fully activates Issei's main character syndrome, motivating him to pedal his bike like an absolute madman to deliver the goods. After finishing his route, he returns to base where RIZZ hits him with one final side quest, explaining that since Koniko got double booked for summonings, Issei gets to take one of her clients, leading Koniko to politely thank him, though Issei fires back that he should be thanking her for letting him grind towards his harem dream. Moments later, Koniko flawlessly pops a teleportation circle while RIZZ stamps Issei's hand with the Gremory crest, basically giving him the VIP guild pass, and then tells our boy to step onto the magic circle. But in a classic skill issue moment, absolutely nothing happens, forcing RIZZ to awkwardly announce that he doesn't have the fast travel perk yet. Because of this massive L, Issei is forced to pedal his squeaky bike all the way across town, aggressively trash-talking his own garbage devil stats, until he finally reaches the objective marker and knocks on the client's door, only for a dude named Morisawa to crack it open, take one look, and instantly slam it shut, bluntly stating he wanted a completely different devil. Since Issei refuses to stop spamming the doorbell, Morisawa yells asking what kind of bootleg devil uses a door, since Koniko usually just stylishly spawns from the flyer. Dropping his pride, Issei admits he tried to do the cool intro but brutally failed the QuickTime event, hence the sweaty bike ride, which makes Morisawa hit him with the "it is what it is" vibe, taking pity on the hopeless noob and offering him a drink. And once inside, the client demands to see his demonic powers, so Issei tries to charge up a Dragon Ball move, completely whiffs it, and awkwardly confesses his skill tree is totally empty. Thoroughly unimpressed, Morisawa pivots entirely and just decides to flex his massive Dragon Ball collection instead, resulting in the two dorks spending the entire session aggressively debating anime tier lists, leaving Issei to bike home absolutely fuming over his failure to secure a single contract. Suddenly, a fallen angel named Kalawana appears and says she's been ordered to erase all traces of him. And when she yeets a glowing spear straight at his dome, Issei barely hits the dodge roll, accidentally exposing the Gremory seal on his hand. But this absolute NPC hits the "I pretend I do not see it" button and tries to pack him up again, prompting Issei to remember RIZZ's advice. So he channels his inner Goku to pull off a Kamehameha, but glitches out and activates his sacred gear instead, completely blasting Kalawana into next week. Totally shook by this sudden op energy, Kalawana decides to report back to the devs and tactically retreats. And later, back at the clubhouse, RIZZ explains that he can now trigger his sacred gear on command, but strongly warns this low-level scrub not to try soloing fallen angels. The next day, Issei heads to school coping with his massive skill issue from the previous night, until he randomly stumbles upon a blonde cutie named Asia, fully displaying her bakery on the sidewalk. Instantly mesmerized by the absolute peak physics underneath her dress, Issei rushes to help her up, realizing she is pure S tier. And since she's exactly his type, he tries to use his RIZZ, but completely fumbles the bag worse than a Discord mod trying to maintain eye contact. When Asia reveals she was literally transferred to the town's church, Issei scans her fit and realizes she's a nun, but the second his eyes lock onto her holy cross, he takes massive emotional damage. And just moments later, they spot a wounded kid on the street, prompting Asia to rush over and cast a healing spell. But while Issei watches this literal angel at work, he randomly takes a tick of passive burn damage on his hand. Shortly after, as they get closer to the church, Issei's demonic soul starts tweaking, and Asia asks him to escort her inside so she can repay his kindness. But Issei hits her with the ultimate, must have been the wind, excuse and dodges the invite, so the pure-hearted nun just introduces herself and tells him to slide by the church anytime. In response, Issei agrees like a total simp and dips out of the danger zone. And later, when he reports the toxic vibes to RIZZ, she drops the law that the church is literally a PvP-restricted area for devils, and stepping inside would instantly trigger a server-wide holy war. Plus, she warns that he's basically begging to get permabanned by hanging around church mains, since their exorcists rock some seriously sacred gears, stating that if he ever gets hit by an exorcism, his data gets permanently wiped from the code, so she tells him to stay frosty and logs off. Later, Aquino drops into the chat with an urgent ping, revealing that the server admins reported a stray devil on the loose. So after the sun sets, RIZZ and the squad fast travel to the coordinates, explaining that familiars who teamkill their masters to go rogue are labeled as strays. Upon entering a creepy abandoned dungeon, RIZZ randomly asks Issei if he plays chess. But since this degenerate only grinds his right arm on the hub, RIZZ has to spoon-feed him the lore, explaining how high-tier devils use an evil chess piece system to buff their guild members with specific combat traits. Completely lost, Issei asks why they even bother with the tabletop mechanics, but RIZZ just tells him to sit back and watch the pros carry. As suddenly the stray devil spawns in, swinging her massive milkers around, leading RIZZ to identify the monster as a rogue visor who desperately needs her cheeks clapped. Without missing a beat, the stray threatens to bathe in RIZZ's blood, revving up her literal chest cannons for a heavy bombardment. And Issei, functioning purely on monkey brain, thinks stray devils are actually pretty peak, until the monster reveals the gross, spider-like lower half of her body. Suddenly, she pops her cooldowns and fires a barrage of highly questionable sticky fluid straight at Issei. But luckily, RIZZ perfectly times her shield, saving this cultured idiot from melting into a puddle. Instantly, Yuto speed blitzes the monster, leaving Issei absolutely flabbergasted by his S-tier agility, while RIZZ explains that Yuto is their knight, maxed out in speed and sword DPS. With zero hesitation, Yuto cleanly amputates the monster's arms, and just as Koniko casually walks up to the raid boss, the stray suddenly pops out massive fangs and completely swallows the lowly whole, making Issei scream in pure panic, though RIZZ just hits the "it is what it is" pose. Just a second later, Koniko literally rips her way out of the monster's stomach from the inside. And RIZZ flexes that Koniko is their rook, boasting broken defensive stats and raw unadulterated strength. Koniko then grabs the monster and straight up yeets it across the room like a ragdoll. And while Aquino slowly approaches to unleash her ultimate, the monster tries a desperate sneak attack on RIZZ, but Issei finally hits a quick-time event, popping his sacred gear to push her out of the hitbox. At this point, RIZZ orders Aquino to execute the boss, prompting Aquino to charge her electric attacks, while RIZZ brags that she herself is the queen, rocking the most broken multi-class stats in the game. Suddenly, Aquino drops a literal thunderstrike on the stray, leaving it paralyzed and drooling, so RIZZ casually casts a deletion spell to finish the raid and calls for extraction. But just before they log out, Issei asks what his specific class is, and RIZZ bluntly reveals he's just a lowly pawn, absolutely shattering his main character syndrome. Later, while grinding his next fetch quest, our boy gets super depressed realizing he's light years away from unlocking the harem ending. And upon arriving at the objective, he finds the front door wide open, his spidey senses tingling with major red flags. But because he refuses to take another L for RIZZ, he pushes through the willful ignorance vibe and steps inside anyway. Almost immediately, he touches the wall and gets his hands coated in fresh blood, only to look down and find the client's lifeless body decorating the floor. As he violently tweaks out, wondering what kind of horror game he stepped into, a creepy dude chilling on the couch smugly claims it's just God's anti-cheat system at work. Introducing himself as Freed, a rogue exorcist, which triggers Issei's fight-or-flight response, making him nervously back away. Freed then unsheathes his holy weapons, loudly bragging that he farms low-level devils for easy XP. And seeing this unhinged behavior, Issei panics as Freed launches a rapid-fire assault, though our boy barely dodges and mashes the button to activate his sacred gear. But when Issei tries to counterattack, his absolute lack of skill gets punished, taking a massive slash to the back and eating the floor. Freed gleefully moves in for the final execution, but suddenly Asia bursts into the room screaming, and Freed wildly introduces her as his personal pocket healer. When Asia recognizes Issei and asks what he's doing in this cursed lobby, Issei drops his head and confesses that he's actually a devil, making Asia burst into tears, while Freed starts giving a massive unskippable cutscene lecture about how devils and humans are completely incompatible. After yapping, Freed goes for the kill, but Asia aggressively body blocks the attack, begging her boss to spare Issei because he passes the vibe check. Completely annoyed by her insubordination, Freed casually takes a warning swipe, instantly ripping Asia's clothes and exposing her sacred mini-cuties, before violently pinning her against the wall like an absolute creep, openly checking out her holy assets. Seeing this disrespect, Issei finally locks in, popping rage mode to stand up for his girl, forcing Freed to drop Asia and shift aggro back to the MC. After briefly checking his terrible stats, Issei knows he's getting mathematically wiped, but his massive ego refuses to back down, so he throws a wild haymaker and actually knocks Freed flat on his ass. Mouthing with pure rage, Freed prepares to turn Issei into sashimi, but Kiba suddenly teleports into the arena to block the attack, backed up by Akino and Koniko. Yuto strictly warns Freed that Issei is part of their guild, but this psycho just gets absolutely bricked up at the thought of hunting a full party of devils. Just then, RIZZ majestically spawns in, aggressively accusing Freed of griefing her personal low-level scrub. And turning to Issei, she asks if he's low on HP, but Issei just apologizes for feeding the enemy, making RIZZ blame herself for sending a noob into a high-level zone. Meanwhile, Freed absolutely stomps on Asia for failing her one job, while RIZZ hits him with the ultimate death stare, stating she has zero chill when someone touches her property. But right as RIZZ charges her ultimate attack, Akino points out that saving Issei's life is the main objective, so Koniko casually yeets a heavy box at Freed while the squad preps their fast travel. And when Issei desperately begs to take Asia with them, RIZZ shuts it down, stating her teleportation spell is strictly guild members only, forcing Issei to scream Asia's name as they log out of the server. The very next day, RIZZ is busy healing Issei's wounds by pressing his face into her magical plushies, but his absolute lack of girth makes him super embarrassed, so he awkwardly shuffles out of the shower. While Akino patches up the rest of his HP, she explains that his debuffs will take a while to clear since that psycho exorcist dealt heavy holy damage, leading Issei to ask if exorcists can also go rogue, to which Yuto clarifies that some holy mains get banned from the church and end up teaming up with fallen angels. Just as Issei realizes this means Asia is basically a stray herself, RIZZ steps out of the steam and coldly confirms his theory. Later, Issei aggressively beats himself up for having negative RIZZ and zero combat skills, devastated that he couldn't even save his crush. So he hits the local park playground to start a classic training montage, only to do 2 pull-ups and realize his noodle arms are absolutely not built for this. But just as he's catastrophizing, assuming Asia is currently getting her cheeks clapped by her psycho boss, she miraculously spawns at the playground. A few moments later, they transition to a local diner, where Issei has to literally teach this sheltered nun how to eat a greasy hamburger. And when he asks how she tracked his location, Asia explains she was simply on AFK break, took a walk, and randomly bumped into his hitbox. Seizing the moment, Issei suggests they spend the entire day avoiding the main quest, so they run around town playing minigames and actually enjoying life. Later, while grabbing some drinks to restore stamina, Asia blushes and admits this is the most fun she's ever had, though Issei thinks she's just heavily capping. Until Asia suddenly senses his HP hasn't fully regenerated, so they find a quiet spot where she channels her holy buffs directly into his body. Instantly, Issei feels his stats return to 100%, praising her broken support abilities, which prompts Asia to drop her tragic backstory, explaining how she was abandoned at a church where she accidentally unlocked her op healing hacks, leading her to become a world-renowned medic, blindly healing players from all over the globe. She thought she was doing God's work until she accidentally healed a demon player, instantly getting her branded as a toxic heretic and perma-banned from the church. Hearing this, Issei realizes this massive misunderstanding is exactly why the fallen angels recruited her, while Asia admits she was totally clueless about the toxic guild she joined. And when she softly mentions she just wants her ultimate dream to come true, Issei asks what it is, and she reveals she literally just wants to build a friend list and have a good time. Hearing that she's been playing solo her whole life, Issei instantly sends a friend request, stating they're officially besties since they've been vibing all day. He asks if that's enough to make her happy, but Asia starts stressing that her toxic party might drag him into their drama. Yet Issei proudly assures her that a devil and a nun can totally cope without breaking the game, hyping himself up. Until Yuma abruptly teleports in, laughing and calling his optimism absolute cap. When Asia recognizes the fallen angel, Yuma coldly tells the poor healer that she can't just rage quit their faction, forcing Asia to confess to Issei that she tried to leave the church guild because she absolutely refuses to participate in PvP killing. Issei nods, saying he already knew she wasn't built for the toxic lobbies, since a pure soul like her doesn't belong with such complete trash, before aggressively turning to Yuma to demand what she wants, only for Yuma to spawn her signature light lance, promising to permanently delete his account this time. To defend himself, Issei desperately triggers his sacred gear. But this just makes Yuma laugh uncontrollably, as she drops the devastating lore that his so-called dragon hand is just a basic tier item that only temporarily doubles his stats. And to add insult to injury, she admits her boss literally forced her to play the fake girlfriend route with a massive loser just because they were paranoid about his tiny little toy. Absolutely malding, Issei yells at her to shut up, but Yuma basically tells him to get good, warning him he stands zero chance and ordering him to drop the healer. In response, Issei channels pure main character syndrome, shouting that he has to prove his manhood and desperately tries to charge his dragon gear, but gets brutally impaled before the animation even finishes. Issei clutch heals him, but Yuma tells her to head back to the church since her gear is way more op than Issei's mid-tier healing. And when Asia cries out that they only want her for her stats, Yuma offers a toxic trade. She'll spare the MC's life if Asia willingly surrenders herself. Refusing to be a total cuck, Issei tries to stand up and protest, but Yuma instantly hurls another light lance straight at his dome. In a split-second reaction, Asia shoves Issei out of the hitbox, causing the lance to detonate right in front of him, launching him into a nearby fountain. As Issei coughs up water, realizing that attack would have instantly deleted him, Yuma arrogantly flexes that she actually missed on purpose, because a direct hit would have atomized him beyond Asia's healing capabilities. Hearing this, Asia completely submits to the emotional blackmail and agrees to go, so Yuma wraps her in her gross fallen angel wings, promising she'll be free from suffering after their upcoming ritual. And right there, as Issei pathetically reaches out for his only friend, Yuma completely vanishes, leaving our boy soaking wet and wallowing in his absolute lack of skill. Later, when Issei logs back into the clubhouse and intensely mouths over his failure, Koniko tells him to just drop it, basically saying that Gremory Guild members shouldn't be massive simps. But Issei actually demands to be kicked from the party so he can solo the rescue mission, claiming he's just a disposable pawn with nothing to lose anyway. Annoyed by his massive skill issue mentality, RIZZ sharply asks if he seriously thinks the pawn is a trash tier class. So Issei asks what the hidden passive is, and RIZZ drops the chess law. If a pawn manages to push deep into enemy territory like the church, they can temporarily promote into literally any other piece except the king. After this massive law drop, Issei reveals what Yuma said about his sacred gear being useless. But RIZZ basically tells him to use his brain, explaining that the gear scales entirely with the user's willpower, meaning the harder he locks in, the higher his DPS goes. Just then, Akino whispers some intel into RIZZ's ear, and the guild master announces they're rolling out. But right before teleporting, RIZZ leaves Issei with a strict warning, Even with the promotion buff, he absolutely cannot solo a fallen angel. Shortly after, Issei gears up to launch his one-man suicide mission. And despite Yuto trying to block the door to dissuade him, Issei fiercely insists they literally cannot stop him. Which makes the squad smile as they reveal RIZZ already ordered them to act as his backup. Meanwhile, somewhere in a spooky forest, RIZZ and Akino spawn in, where a fallen angel named Mittelt drops from a tree to confront them. After a cocky introduction, RIZZ casually mentions that Akino easily tracked her IP address, asking if she's trying to stall because she's scared. But Mittelt claims she's just running crowd control to ensure no filthy devils interrupt their highly important ritual. Highly amused by this, Akino hits her with a smirk and announces that their DPS squad just deployed to completely ruin their raid, absolutely infuriating Mittelt. Cut back to Issei and the boys arriving at the church, their danger senses tingling as they realize the zone is heavily guarded by priests. But Koniko just says bet, aggressively kicking the front door off its hinges, where that psycho Fried is waiting in the lobby. Fried instantly draws his weapons with a manic grin, and when Issei demands to know where Asia is, the psycho casually reveals she's in the basement boss room, but they'll have to get past him first. Suddenly, Koniko just straight up yeets a heavy church pew at his face, while Yuto flanks with insane speed. But since Fried actually dodges the wombo combo, Issei pops his sacred gear to join the fray. Meanwhile, back in the forest, Mittelt realizes she's outmatched and summons Kalawarna and Donaseek to turn it into a 3v2 against RIZZ and Akino. Back at the church raid, Issei charges Fried like an absolute madman but gets shot at, so he perfectly times his pawn promotion, tanks the bullet, and delivers a devastating right hook straight to Fried's jaw. Realizing he's mathematically outgunned, Fried cowardly logs out of the server, allowing the squad to breach the ritual site where Yuma is mid-cast, brutally extracting Asia's sacred gear. With a twisted smile, Yuma violently absorbs the glowing green artifact into her own body, declaring she has officially leveled up into a supreme fallen angel, and bragging that she finally has the stats to wipe out everyone who ever looked down on her. Without hesitation, Yuto speed blitzes the remaining guards while Koniko jumps in to provide heavy crowd control, allowing Issei to desperately sprint toward the massive cross where Asia is chained, as Yuma mockingly releases the binds as a reward for him actually making it to the boss room. Absolutely malding, Issei demands she return Asia's stolen loot, but Yuma just scoffs, charging her ultimate attack and threatening to team-wipe them all. Trying to appeal to her humanity, Issei pathetically mentions he thought they were soulmates, which just makes Yuma laugh hysterically, admitting she only dated him as a joke because he was a painfully boring, inexperienced loser. As she continues to ruthlessly cyberbully his genuine feelings, Issei screams at her to shut up, which completely kills her vibe, prompting Yuma to launch a lethal attack. But Issei manages to grab Asia and hit a tactical retreat, while Yuto and Koniko continue farming the trash mobs. Carrying her to the upper floor of the church, Issei gently lays Asia down, desperately begging her to keep her HP up because they still have so much to do together. Asia smiles weakly, whispering that she's genuinely happy she managed to make at least one real friend. But hearing her give up, Issei starts trauma-dumping all the sweet, wholesome things he still wants to experience with her. Tears streaming down his face as he promises to introduce her to his boys and throw a massive celebration party. Watching him cry over her, Asia sheds a single tear, smiles, and tragically logs out of life. Absolutely shattered by her permadeath, Issei screams at the ceiling, begging God to undo this glitch because all she ever wanted was a simple friend list. But instead of a miracle, Yuma hovers into the room, sadistically mocking his grief. Meanwhile, back in the forest PvP zone, the fallen angels are loudly trashing Issei for getting played so hard by Yuma. And when they try to jump RIZZ, their magic attacks literally just bounce off her absolute unit of a shield. Hitting her boiling point, RIZZ enters pure rage mode, preparing to absolutely wipe the floor with them for disrespecting her pawn. Back in the church ruins, Yuma casually flexes a fresh cut she got from Yuto, instantly using Asia's stolen gear to heal the damage right in front of Issei. While she yaps endlessly about her new op stats and how she's finally going to get promoted by her bosses, Issei completely snaps, stating he doesn't give a damn about her guild politics, yelling that Asia never discriminated against anyone and didn't deserve to get packed up. but Yuma coldly dismisses it as the undeniable fate of anyone harboring a sacred gear, which just pisses Issei off even more, screaming that she could have easily lived a peaceful, normal life. When Issei cries that Asia was his true friend, Yuma hits him with the ultimate toxicity, blaming him for being too weak to protect her. Hearing this absolute slander, Issei hits his breaking point, violently recalling Ria's advice that his gear's power scales directly with his raw emotion. Locking in completely, he activates his dragon hand and launches a furious assault, but Yuma easily dodges, mocking him that his garbage-tier gear couldn't even dent her. Refusing to stay down, Issei keeps charging like a madman, so Yuma hurls 2 glowing lances straight through his legs, but even as the holy magic burns his flesh, Issei completely ignores the pain, aggressively pulling the lances out and declaring his damage is nothing compared to Asia's. Actually surprised by his endurance, Yuma slow claps, commending him for surviving this long as a bottom-tier devil. But since God left him on reed, Issei decides to pray to Satan instead, demanding raw, unadulterated power as he violently forces himself back to his feet. Completely shocked, Yuma stammers that his HP should be 0, but as Issei slowly advances like a horror movie villain, he confirms he feels every ounce of pain, but has officially entered the accepting the chaos vibe. Suddenly, his sacred gear glows intensely and levels up, mutating into a massive, heavily armored gauntlet with sharp claws, completely terrifying Yuma as she realizes she massively miscalculated his potential. Panicking, she spams another light lance at his face, but Issei effortlessly tanks the hit with his new armor. And when she tries to fly away, Issei physically grabs her ankle and violently yeets her straight through the church window. Suddenly, Yuto slides into the area to provide backup, openly admitting he never expected a noob to actually 1v1 a fallen angel and win. And when Issei angrily asks what took so long, Yuto reveals that RIZZ strictly ordered them to sit back and let him cook. Right on cue, RIZZ majestically steps through a portal, proudly stating she always knew he had the stats to clear the boss by himself, totally stunning Issei. She calmly brushes off her shoulders, mentioning she just finished team-wiping the forest squad and fast-traveled over to watch the finale. Koniko then literally drags a battered Yuma back inside by her hair, as RIZZ officially introduces herself as the next in line of the elite Gremory family, casually flexing that she just obliterated her entire squad. She drops the mic by admitting she knew about their illegal operations the whole time, but only interfered because they made the fatal mistake of targeting her personal pawn. Locking eyes on Issei's newly evolved gauntlet, RIZZ brutally informs Yuma that her intel was absolute trash, and Issei's gear is infinitely more dangerous than she thought. Dropping the ultimate lore bomb, she reveals the gear has the potential to temporarily bypass the level cap of both God and Satan, identifying it as the legendary boosted gear of the Red Dragon Emperor. But to keep his ego in check, RIZZ reminds Issei that the gear requires massive charge time, and he only won because Yuma got cocky and threw the match. Desperate and cornered, Yuma drops her angel form and shapeshifts back into Issei's girlfriend, trying a pathetic psychological attack by holding up the cheap souvenir he bought her on their date. Seeing this massive red flag, Yuto reaches for his sword, but RIZZ puts a hand up, testing Issei to see if he's still a massive simp. And finally showing some character growth, Issei coldly turns his back on her toxic manipulation and gives RIZZ the green light to finish the job. The absolute second RIZZ unleashes her destructive aura, Yuma drops the disguise but gets instantly vaporized into digital dust. After looting the boss, RIZZ recovers Asia's stolen sacred gear and suggests they return it to its rightful owner. But as Issei gently places it back on her lifeless body, he breaks down again, cursing his low stats for failing to save her. Hitting him with the ultimate plot twist, RIZZ tells him to chill out, pulling a glowing bishop chess piece from her inventory and explaining that a bishop's entire role is to play support and heal the party. Since Asia is basically a max-level healer, RIZZ declares she's the perfect fit for the class, announcing her absolute master plan to use the piece to resurrect Asia as a devil. Moments later, the magic circle flashes and Asia actually respawns, allowing RIZZ to formally assign Issei as her senior guide to show her the ropes of being a demon. The next day, Issei struts into the clubroom like he owns the place, asking RIZZ if she plans to recruit any more pawns, openly whining that he doesn't want to compete for her attention. But RIZZ shuts down his insecurity instantly, revealing that he is literally her only pawn, because his resurrection cost her all 8 pawn slots combined. She then smoothly wraps her arms around him from behind, pressing his head directly into her absolute premium pillows, purring that she spent all her resources on him because of the insane potential of his boosted gear. Leaning in close, she locks eyes with him, hyping him up and ordering him to grind until he becomes the most overpowered pawn in history. And completely out of nowhere, RIZZ plants a soft kiss right on his lips, calling it a temporary stat buff to encourage his leveling. But just as she teases that their solo cuddle sessions are over now that he has another girl to look after, Issei walks in, immediately malfunctioning over how flawlessly gorgeous RIZZ is. Out of pure habit, Issei tries to pray for forgiveness, but instantly clutches her head as she takes holy damage, forcing RIZZ to gently remind the poor girl that she's officially a demon now, and God's Wi-Fi doesn't connect down here. Noticing her fresh fit, Issei realizes she's rocking the school uniform and asks if she actually transferred in. So RIZZ casually flexes her nepotism, explaining that her dad basically owns the school board, making enrollment a complete breeze. Soon after, the rest of the guild logs in, with Aquino bringing a massive welcome cake to celebrate their new healer, totally unaware that a hidden spectator is currently spying on their lobby. A few days later, Issei is wandering the clubroom and randomly finds a highly suspicious pair of lacy undergarments hanging out to dry, naturally grabbing them for closer inspection. Calculating the dimensions with pure degenerate math, he deduces they must belong to Issei, right as Koniko stealths behind him and delivers a swift karate chop to his head for being an absolute menace. With perfect comedic timing, Issei steps out of the shower room, prompting Issei to frantically rehang the loot, while Issei shyly apologizes for leaving her gear out in the open. Trying to play it cool, Issei says it's no big deal since she's practically homeless anyway, but Issei reveals RIZZ is already carrying her through the housing market before classes officially start. Shortly after, RIZZ drops by to hit Issei with a harsh reality check, informing him that the recent boss fight proved his base stats are absolute garbage, and he's officially starting intense morning training drills. Next morning, Issei is on that grind with RIZZ, hyping himself up with the ultimate motivation, becoming the undisputed harem king. But when he complains that he didn't expect devils to have such a sweaty training arc, RIZZ strictly warns him she doesn't carry weak players, forcing him to sprint faster and promise to stop slacking. Shortly after the cardio, RIZZ literally massages his back using her premium pillows, dropping the law that a devil's rank in the underworld is heavily influenced by their raw physical stats. To push his limits, Issei starts doing push-ups with RIZZ casually sitting on his back, but his absolute monkey brain instantly gets distracted by the soft physics of her bakery. So RIZZ detects his degenerate energy, swiftly spanking him and telling him to delete his cultured thoughts. Issei then notices RIZZ scanning the area for something, and right on cue, Issei spawns into the room. Like a perfect NPC maid, she serves some tea to Issei, who confusedly asks what she's doing at his spawn point. And when Issei innocently replies that RIZZ summoned her, they both look to the guild master for answers, who simply announces they're all fast traveling to Issei's house. Upon arriving at his base, Issei finds a massive pile of luggage on the porch and asks who's moving in. To which Issei happily claims the bags, while RIZZ casually drops the bomb that Issei is officially his new roommate. As Issei completely blue screens at this information, RIZZ smoothly explains that she let Issei pick any safe house, and the pure-hearted healer immediately chose his. Shortly after, they drag Issei's parents into a cutscene to explain the new living arrangement, but his own parents brutally roast him, suggesting Issei find a different lobby since Issei is a total menace who thinks with his joystick. Countering their concerns, RIZZ hits them with the ultimate logic. They can use this co-op experience to train Issei into the perfect future housewife. Hearing this absolute W idea, Issei's parents instantly accept the chaos, thrilled that their massive disappointment of a son might actually secure a W. While they happily smash the accept button on RIZZ's proposal, Issei awkwardly mutters that he hasn't even unlocked the marriage questline yet. Fast forward to Issei's first day on the server, she confidently introduces herself to the class, while Issei's thirsty homies immediately scan her stats. But the absolute second she innocently drops the law that she's living with Issei, his friends instantly go rogue and try to teamkill him for hoarding all the S tier drops. Meanwhile, Issei watches Asia successfully complete the socialization minigame with the other girls, completely unaware that the girls are actually feeding her massive survival tips on how to avoid getting groped by his degenerate hands. After the school bell rings, Issei gives Asia a ride home on his squeaky bike, asking if her social battery is completely drained. But Asia beams with pure joy, stating she actually had a blast because all the NPCs were super friendly, even his weirdo friends. Instantly suspicious, Issei asks if those clowns tried any funny business, but she cluelessly reveals they just formally invited her to their next highly questionable gentlemen's club meeting. A few moments later, they roll into the clubhouse lobby, finding RIZZ totally AFK and staring into space. And when her controller reconnects, she announces that Asia will be running her very first solo raid tonight, prompting Issei to explain the mechanics of teleporting to a client and securing a contract. However, Issei loudly protests that she's way too underleveled for solo queues, since she literally just spawned as a devil a few days ago. Just then, Akino glides in, casually flexing that it's completely fine because Asia's raw magical DPS is actually second only to her own. Despite her broken stats, Issei's main character syndrome kicks in, insisting he needs to play bodyguard and offering to co-op the mission until she learns the map. Pedaling furiously to the objective marker, Issei aggressively stresses that the client might be a toxic Discord mod looking to steal her sweet innocence. And shortly after reaching the waypoint, he knocks on the door only to find a massive, muscular dude cosplaying as a literal magical girl. When this absolute unit of a Barbie introduces himself as Milton, Issei's brain completely crashes from the sheer absurdity. Milton then drops his ridiculous quest request, demanding Issei summon a real-life magical girl, to which Issei bluntly tells him to just buy a silicone figure instead. After getting denied his delusional fantasies, Milton literally bursts into tears like a massive baby, forcing Issei to awkwardly pat his back so he doesn't aggro the neighbors. To make things infinitely worse, Milton then creepily suggests they just Netflix and chill to pass the time. Later, biking back to base with absolute negative RIZZ, Issei deeply questions why he only rolls the weirdest NPCs, right as RIZZ randomly calls him from the shower to check his quest progress. The next day at school, while his boys are busy aggressively zooming in on the girls in gym class, Issei is stuck in his head, completely bummed about RIZZ's disappointed tone after he failed yet another contract. So he decides to hit the willful ignorance vibe, skipping the tutorial and taking a nap instead. After catching some Z's in the clubroom, Issei slowly opens his eyes only to find a massive, glorious amount of plot directly in his face. Absolutely paralyzed by the sight of RIZZ sleeping next to him with zero armor equipped, his right hand completely bypasses his brain and auto-aims straight for her mommy milkers. Suddenly, RIZZ's eyes snap open, causing Issei to violently retract his hand and awkwardly ask how she even spawned in his bed. With zero hesitation, RIZZ smoothly explains her stamina bar was low, so she decided to share the save point. Casually folding her wings away before hitting him with a smirk, asking if he enjoys the exclusive premium content. When Issei enthusiastically confirms he is a Tier 3 sub, RIZZ drops the ultimate incentive. If he successfully secures a contract tonight, she'll let him fully interact with her Milky Way orbs. Hypermotivated by the loot drop, Issei and RIZZ fast travel to the client's location later that day, while the rest of the guild stays behind and wishes him max RNG. Loading into the client's apartment, they are instantly greeted by a woman fully decked out in heavy samurai armor, who nervously introduces herself as Susan, explaining she wears the max defense gear purely because the night levels are way too spooky. Getting straight to business, Issei asks for the quest details, and Susan sheepishly requests an escort mission back to her college campus to retrieve some forgotten notes because her fear stats are maxed out. Issei instantly accepts the incredibly easy fetch quest, completely tweaking out in his head about finally unlocking his boob-touching reward, until Susan awkwardly mentions there's actually a hidden phase 2 to the quest. Panicking that he might lose his buff, Issei tries to decline, but RIZZ elegantly steps in and accepts the side mission for him. Shifting into full therapist mode, RIZZ listens as Susan trauma dumps about her massive crush and her absolute inability to confess her feelings. And while they try to strategize a high success rate dialogue option, Issei randomly suggests she just use the classic letter confession meta. Taking the advice, Susan writes the love letter and literally shoots it out the window attached to a freaking arrow. By morning, the absolute mad lad she has a crush on actually arrives in full shiny armor with the arrow still stuck in his helmet, smoothly declaring he received her message and is totally down to co-op a date. Later back at the guild hall, RIZZ gives Issei that look and asks if he wants to claim his quest reward, and our boy instantly confirms it is time to redeem his prize. RIZZ generously sets a 5-second timer for him to go wild on her melons, but Issei's virgin brain completely overloads trying to formulate a strategy, and as RIZZ counts down, the rest of the squad violently bursts into the room, totally griefing his one shot. Seeing his soul literally leave his body, RIZZ hits him with a pity hug, softly telling him to keep grinding for next time, while the rest of the guild stands there completely baffled by the interaction. A few days later, Issei loudly announces he's logging in to spam more flyers, but RIZZ informs him this is his final week of doing grunt work because the tutorial is over, though she adds he still needs to unlock a familiar first. To demonstrate, RIZZ summons her personal pet, which turns out to be a cute little bat, while Akino and Koniko flex their own familiars, though Issei aggressively tells Yuto to keep his pretty boy pet in its pokeball. While RIZZ dumps the lore on how familiars are basically essential for map awareness and fetch quests, Asia excitedly asks how she can unlock one for herself. Right on cue, Sona, the strict student council president, marches into the room with her entire squad, leaving RIZZ slightly surprised and asking why the rival guild is crashing their lobby. Sona elegantly pushes up her glasses, stating they just dropped by to formally exchange guild rosters since both teams recently acquired some noobs. While Issei is completely lost, Akino drops the intel that Sona is actually the heir to the prestigious Citri family, completely blowing Issei's mind that the school is basically crawling with undercover demons. When Saji, the blonde newbie in Sona's squad, loudly questions if Issei skipped the entire tutorial phase, Sona politely explains that their two factions usually stay in their own lanes and avoid crossplay. Issei then recognizes Saji as the sweaty new student council secretary, while Sona proudly confirms he is her newly acquired pawn. RIZZ fires back by officially introducing Issei as her personal pawn and Asia as her dedicated bishop. But the second Saji realizes he shares the exact same class as Issei, he loudly complains that it's deeply offensive to be matched with such a known degenerate. Instantly triggered by the disrespect, Issei steps up, but Saji aggressively flexes that it took 4 whole pawn pieces just to summon him. Without missing a beat, Sona casually tells her boy to sit down, dropping the nuke that Issei actually cost RIZZ all 8 of her pieces. After destroying her own pawn's ego, Sona politely apologizes and suggests the two noobs should just add each other and co-op. Trying to play nice, Saji introduces himself to Asia, but starts acting way too friendly, prompting Issei to violently snatch his hand away, promising to permaban him if he tries rizzing up his healer. The PvP tension instantly spikes as the two start talking heavy trash, with Saji arrogantly flexing that he already has a familiar while Issei is still grinding flyer quests. Refusing to take the L, Issei loudly bluffs that he's literally about to go catch his own S-tier pet right now. Hearing this, Sona smoothly interjects, revealing her guild is also scheduled for a familiar hunting raid. But because the familiar master only spawns once a month, they decide to settle the dispute with a classic minigame to see who gets first dibs on the loot pool. The next day, RIZZ and Akino hit the courts for an intense 2v2 tennis match against Sona and Shinra, the serious student council VP. The second the match kicks off, Issei completely ignores the gameplay, aggressively trying to glitch the camera angle to see under their tennis skirts. To his absolute shock, Matsuda and Motohama randomly spawn beside him, fully equipped with high-powered binoculars. When Issei asks how they got the server invite, his bros proudly claim that news of this S-tier event spread through the school forums instantly. While Issei tries to compliment their impressive athletic stats, his degenerate friends openly admit they are strictly here for the jiggle physics. Watching from the sidelines, Koniko dryly points out that the guild leaders agreed to a strict no-magic rule. But the players almost immediately start subtly weaving elemental buffs into their swings. Fortunately, the clueless NPC crowd just thinks they're watching a really intense anime sports arc. Since the tennis match ended in a sweaty draw, RIZZ summons the squad back to the clubroom, and announces the tiebreaker will be settled via a high-stakes dodgeball match tomorrow night. Later that night, Issei sneaks out of his room and lightly knocks on Asia's door. But when she opens it wearing nothing but her absolute minimum defense nightgown, he instantly turns away to avoid catching a case, awkwardly asking if she has a sewing kit he can borrow. The following night, RIZZ and the Gremory squad hit the gym to warm up for the final showdown. And while Akino generously helps Asia stretch, Issei's brain completely short-circuits as he imagines the absolute spiciest Yuri scenarios between them. Sensing his power level rising for all the wrong reasons, Koniko violently punches the horny straight out of him. Later, Issei drops custom headbands for the whole squad, knowing they've been sweating it out for him and Asia. Just as the team starts praising him for finally using his brain for a W, Sona's rival squad marches onto the court, and the whistle blows to start the chaos. The match instantly devolves into a magical warzone, and Koniko takes a direct hit that completely shreds her uniform, forcing her to hit the bench for a wardrobe malfunction. Refusing to back down, RIZZ counters with a lethal throw, completely obliterating an opponent's clothes in the exact same fashion. Easily distracted by the flying fabric, Issei drops his guard, but Akino perfectly parries a sneak attack and yells at him to lock in. Realizing Issei is the weak link, Sona's squad ruthlessly focuses all their aggro onto him. And although he hits some sick dodge rolls, he eventually takes a critical hit straight to the family jewels. As Issei hits the floor in pure agony, Asia rushes in to cast a healing spell, while the rest of the guild enters pure rage mode to avenge their fallen comrade. In absolute retaliation, they focus fire and brutally eliminate Sagi, leaving Sona as the last player standing for her team. Just before RIZZ can drop the final nuke, the ref blows the whistle, officially declaring the Gremory Guild as the undisputed champions. Back at the clubhouse, the squad pops off celebrating their massive victory, though Issei acts super depressed about getting eliminated early. Until Yuto hits him with the ultimate bro move, pointing out that his custom headbands gave them the crucial morale buff they needed to win. With that settled, it's finally time for the gang to go hunt down a familiar. So Akino drops a fast travel portal, teleporting the entire squad to a creepy enchanted forest where familiars naturally spawn. Instantly, an NPC named Zatouji, the official familiar master, phases into existence, dropping the lore that the full moon provides a massive buff to catch rates. And when he asks what specific class of pet they're looking to farm, Issei instantly requests a cute, S-tier anime girl pet. Shutting down his degenerate fantasy, Zatouji bluntly states he needs to pick a pet that actually synergizes with his build. So the squad moves deeper into the zone until they hit a massive river. And when Zatouji reveals a water spirit spawns here, Issei's mind immediately starts rendering a flawless mermaid waifu. Tragically, the mob that actually breaches the surface is a hulking, muscular hitman-looking water elemental, forcing Issei to instantly hit the decline button. Moving on to the next spawn point, they stumble upon a literal sprite dragon. And Zatouji hypes it up, stating it deals heavy cerulean lightning damage, but adds the caveat that it cannot be tamed once it hits max level. Thinking it looks incredibly OP, Issei decides to initiate the tame. Until randomly, highly corrosive slime droplets start raining from the canopy, violently melting through everyone's armor. But because Issei's plot armor conveniently protects him from the acid, he just stands there proudly enjoying the S-tier jiggle physics. Until Koniko swiftly delivers a critical strike to his skull for being an absolute creep. With a slime literally blinding him, Zatouji calmly explains that these specific slimes deal 0 HP damage but basically auto-delete women's clothing. Hearing this absolutely broken mechanic, Issei instantly decides he wants the slime as his familiar, though RIZZ sighs and tells him to stop griefing his own progression. Reaching her absolute limit, RIZZ casually pops a fire spell to incinerate the slime off herself, making Issei scream in pure agony over the lost plot. While the rest of the girls follow suit and execute the slimes, leaving only Asia struggling to clear the debuff. Seeing his chance, Issei violently body blocks Asia, claiming he's protecting the sacred slimes. But RIZZ orders him to move so she can cast her AoE fire spell and cleanse the healer. Refusing to back down, Issei passionately argues that this specific slime was quite literally engineered for his playstyle. Suddenly, out of absolutely nowhere, the sprite dragon drops a massive thunderbolt directly on Issei's head, instantly vaporizing the slimes and leaving him crispy. The tiny dragon then smugly lands on Asia's shoulder, while Zatoji laughs, explaining the dragon totally misread the aggro and thought Issei was attacking the healer. Capitalizing on the moment, Asia successfully initiates the tame and names her brand new pet RIZZ. Still salty, Issei tries to pet the dragon, but gets hit with another point-blank lightning strike. The next day at school, Issei loudly complains while Asia happily cuddles her new pet, earning him yet another targeted lightning strike to the face. Asia quickly dismisses RIZZ back to its inventory, while Issei dramatically swears he will eventually farm an absolute S-tier familiar of his own. Sometime later, Issei is locked in deep sleep, experiencing a highly detailed cutscene where he's literally getting married to RIZZ. Totally baffled by how he unlocked the true ending so fast, Issei just rolls with it, incredibly hyped to secure his ultimate waifu. As he starts mentally prepping for the honeymoon phase, the priest finally hits the kiss the bride prompt. But the absolute second he leans in, the entire simulation aggressively crashes to black. Out of the darkness, a massive, booming voice drops the lore that he's actually the ancient dragon emperor spirit living inside the sacred gear, violently waking Issei from his dream. Later in class, his absolute degenerate friends eavesdrop as Asia casually mentions she should have woken him up earlier, loudly asking if she literally spawns in his bed every single day. When Issei nonchalantly confirms it, his bros practically foam at the mouth, wondering how this scrub maximized his RIZZ overnight, and Matsuda desperately begs Issei to wingman him, offering VIP tickets to the next local Gooner convention in exchange. To troll them, Issei fakes sending a text and brightly announces he actually secured a blind date for them. Completely hyped, they ask for her stats, and Issei smoothly replies she's a pure maiden named Milton. Shortly after, Issei and his squad revert to their creepy roots, hiding inside a locker to get unauthorized peeks at the girls' changing room. But the absolute second Issei's eyes lock onto Koniko, her broken danger sense triggers, and she throws a devastating punch straight through the metal door, instantly knocking out his friends and leaving Issei completely paralyzed with fear. Later back at base, Asia is forced to use heavy healing magic to repair Issei's completely caved-in face. While Koniko stands in the corner coldly stating he absolutely deserved the critical hit. When RIZZ genuinely asks why he's such an unhinged degenerate, Issei pulls the ultimate skill issue excuse, blaming his toxic friends for corrupting his hard drive. Completely missing the point, Asia innocently offers to just show him her body if he's that curious, but Issei frantically declines. Once the noobs leave the room, Aquino reports that despite Issei failing every single contract, his clients are actually leaving him 5-star Yelp reviews. While Aquino finds this hilarious, RIZZ is genuinely stressing that Issei's self-esteem is tanking, stating she needs to buff his confidence manually. But Aquino hits her with a reality check, warning RIZZ that she's heavily overinvesting in a single pawn, though RIZZ aggressively tells her to mind her own business. Taking the hint, Aquino logs off, just as a highly complex teleportation circle suddenly begins glowing in the center of the room. Meanwhile, Issei is having a massive panic attack thinking Koniko permanently hates him, so he tries to take a shower to cool off, but accidentally breaches the door while Asia is still inside. Absolutely shocked to see his full loadout exposed, they both scream in pure panic. As Issei wildly tries to retreat, Asia surprisingly grabs his arm, innocently stating it's her first time ever seeing a real male hitbox. While Issei aggressively apologizes for the accidental griefing, Asia hits the accepting the chaos vibe, casually suggesting they just co-op the bath together to learn about each other's anatomy. She then completely breaks his brain by hugging him from behind, whispering that she wants a piece of him. With his internal CPU literally melting down, Issei desperately grabs her shoulders, trying to explain the basic logic that she's supposed to be furious when a dude crashes her lobby. And with absolute perfect comedic timing, Issei's mom opens the door, catching them locked in this highly questionable stance. A few minutes later, Issei is violently trying to scrub the extremely NSFW images of Asia from his cache, but it's completely useless. Suddenly, RIZZ literally teleports directly into his bedroom, frantically demanding he take her V-card immediately because it's a total emergency. Before his brain can even process the text prompt, RIZZ starts aggressively stripping, sending Issei into a massive panic since he didn't even pre-buff for this boss fight. Seeing him totally freeze up, RIZZ gets insecure and asks if he's rejecting the quest, but Issei stammers that he's just completely overwhelmed. RIZZ drops the law that she simulated every possible outcome, and Issei is mathematically the perfect choice because of his hidden potential, promising the entire sequence will be over quickly. Without waiting for confirmation, she physically straddles him, guiding his hand to the objective marker, but since this absolute virgin keeps lagging out, she gets frustrated and asks if he's going to fail the QuickTime event. Just before Issei can finally commit, a high-level maid abruptly spawns in the room, coldly stating that her master and Lucifer will be massively disappointed to catch her grinding with a low-tier commoner. Completely confused by the massive lore drop, Issei asks what she's talking about, and RIZZ casually reveals that Lucifer is literally her older brother. Turning her aggro to the maid, RIZZ furiously declares she can give her loot to whoever she wants, strictly warning the maid to stop trash-talking her pawn. Ignoring the tantrum, the maid forcefully re-equips RIZZ's armor and formally introduces herself as Grafia, the elite head servant of the Gremory clan. While Issei is busy getting completely mesmerized by Grafia's S-tier design, RIZZ pinches his cheek to snap him out of it, apologizing for throwing such a massive curveball. Scanning his stats, Grafia instantly recognizes him as the glitched devil harboring the sacred gear, prompting RIZZ to call a timeout and suggest they move the dialogue to her office tomorrow. The next morning, while walking to school and heavily analyzing his near-miss with RIZZ, Issei gets absolutely ambushed by his friends, who violently attack him for setting them up with a cross-dressing bodybuilder. Later, safely at school, Issei asks Yuto if he has any intel on RIZZ's weird behavior. But Yuto just shrugs, assuming it's some high-level guild politics he doesn't have the clearance for. Upon entering the clubroom, Grafia asks RIZZ if she wants to brief her squad on the upcoming patch notes. But right as RIZZ steps up to the mic, an incredibly arrogant dude named RIZZ teleports in, casually calling RIZZ his love, while Grafia formally introduces him as a high-ranking noble from the Phoenix clan. When she drops the nuke that he is also RIZZ's official fiancé, RIZZ arrogantly takes a sip of tea, smoothly complimenting RIZZ's brewing skills. But as he tries to get handsy with her, RIZZ violently swats him away, flat out stating she has absolute zero interest in his route. Completely unfazed, RIZZ hits her with the harsh reality that she doesn't have a choice, because this alliance is a mandatory main quest for both their families. Despite the pressure, RIZZ doubles down, claiming she'll marry whoever the hell she wants, but RIZZ coldly reminds her this forced marriage is required to maintain the pure-blood devil meta. When RIZZ aggressively refuses again, RIZZ violently grabs her chin, threatening to drag her to the underworld by force even if he has to permanently delete her entire party to do it. With the PvP tension hitting critical mass, Grafia steps in to enforce a server-wide ceasefire. And the absolute second she invokes Lucifer's name, RIZZ instantly backs off and drops his aggro. Grafia then explains that the admins completely expected this toxic behavior, officially ordering them to settle the dispute through a sanctioned rating game. When Issei cluelessly asks what the hell a rating game is, Yuto explains it's basically an esports chess match where high-level devils use their party members to fight for dominance. Hearing this, RIZZ laughs uncontrollably, bragging that he's basically a grandmaster who's won multiple tournaments, while RIZZ is just an unranked scrub. To rub salt in the wound, RIZZ looks around the room, asking if this tiny squad is her entire roster, and when she confirms it, he snaps his fingers and literally summons his maxed-out party of 15 servants. Seeing that every single one of his servants is a top-tier waifu, Issei completely loses his mind out of pure, unadulterated jealousy. When RIZZ confusedly asks why the pawn is crying, RIZZ sighs and explains that Issei's only life goal is to build a massive harem. Taking the opportunity to exert maximum dominance, RIZZ grabs one of his girls and starts making out with her right in front of Issei. And while casually squeezing her massive assets, he coldly tells Issei that a bottom-tier loser like him will never unlock this achievement. Absolutely shattered by the disrespect, Issei screams that he's a massive scumbag, but when RIZZ tells him to stay in his lane, Issei pops his sacred gear, fully intending to initiate combat. Charging forward like a mindless bot, Issei tries to land a hit, but RIZZ doesn't even flinch, just casually ordering one of his pawns to handle the trash. In a split second, a tiny girl steps up and delivers a devastating counterattack, instantly dropping Issei's HP to 0. Panicking, RIZZ rushes to revive her fallen teammate, while Issei completely blacks out as RIZZ openly mocks his pathetic combat stats. Driven by pure spite, RIZZ officially accepts the rating game challenge, highly amusing RIZZ, who just laughs maniacally before teleporting out with his massive squad. A few days later, RIZZ takes the guild to a remote training camp to grind stats, and we see Issei absolutely dying as he tries to carry a massive backpack up a mountain. Seeing him completely out of stamina, Issei sweetly offers to carry some of his loot. But RIZZ strictly forbids it, saying he needs the raw strength XP. Just then, Yuto effortlessly sprints past Issei with an equally heavy load. And when Koniko zooms by carrying a backpack literally twice her size, Issei's ego completely shatters and he just faceplants into the dirt. It turns out Grafia was the one who designed this brutal training arc to prep them for the tournament. So once they finally reach the peak, RIZZ immediately herds them inside the facility to start the real grind. A little while later, Issei is thrown into a sparring match with Yuto. But after wildly swinging his wooden sword like a total noob, Yuto effortlessly parries, disarms him, and bonks him on the head. Next up, Akino tries to teach Issei and Asia how to properly channel their mana pools, and while Issei struggles to even cast a basic spell, Asia flawlessly executes it on the first try. Akino is incredibly impressed by Asia's hidden magical talent, while Issei forces a smile, trying to hide the fact that he's deeply ashamed of his own garbage stats. Moving on to advanced techniques, Akino demonstrates how to bend water using pure magic, instructing Asia to replicate the spell, while telling Issei he needs to go back to the basics and learn how to actually focus. She explains that magic requires a crystal-clear mental image to successfully cast. But when Issei closes his eyes to concentrate, his degenerate brain instantly floods with high-def images of Akino's massive assets. Later during combat drills with Koniko, Issei gets violently dropkicked straight into a tree, and when she emotionlessly calls him a weakling, Issei pops his rage mode and charges her, only to get instantly caught in a brutal thigh chokehold while she calmly critiques his terrible footwork. After taking an absolute beating for hours, Issei collapses onto a rock, staring at the sky and heavily questioning why his skill tree is so phenomenally garbage. Suddenly, Koniko looms over him, dropping some facts about how everyone in the party has their own specialty. And hearing this, Issei desperately looks up, asking if she actually knows what his hidden stat is. With absolute zero hesitation, Koniko casually roasts him, stating his only real talent is being a massive cultured degenerate, though she adds he does grind pretty hard. And surprisingly, Issei takes the backhanded compliment as a massive buff, deciding to lock in and try even harder. Later on, RIZZ initiates a minigame to test Issei and Asia's mana control, instructing them to cook a meal using only their raw magic. The moment she leaves the room, Asia flawlessly boils water using pure magical energy, prompting Issei to grab a potato, violently trying to recall the tiny flicker of magic he managed to produce during Akino's tutorial. Right as his brain randomly autofills with images of Akino's massive melons, his magic suddenly activates and perfectly peels the potato. Genuinely impressed by his sudden skill, Asia sweetly commends him. So Issei grabs another potato and intentionally visualizes Akino's heavy artillery again. When the horny magic successfully peels it again, he completely spams the exploit, rapidly peeling every single potato in the kitchen. Because of his massive overfarming, Issei and the squad are forced to aggressively speed-eat the mountain of excess food. To make things even worse, Issei just sits there completely zoning out, actively imagining all the guild members completely unequipped, until Koniko bluntly calls him out for radiating pure creep energy. Breaking the tension, RIZZ asks Issei for a review of his first day of boot camp, but our boy just loudly complains about being the absolute lowest level scrub on the server. RIZZ then drops some heavy guild leadership wisdom, explaining that his ops sacred gear and Asia's S-tier healing are massive assets, strictly advising them to play safe and avoid feeding the enemy team. Suddenly, RIZZ casually suggests they hit the guild bathhouse to recover stamina, making Issei literally launch himself out of his chair in pure excitement. While the girls heavily troll him about joining their lobby, Koniko delivers a death stare, promising to permanently hate him if he tries any wall hacks. So while the girls luxuriously soak in the hot spring, Issei desperately tries to glitch his camera through the partition wall, while Yuto just sighs and tells him to give up the impossible quest. But Issei refuses to quit, proudly declaring that his ultimate passive skill is being a relentless creep. Later that night, operating on pure goblin energy, Issei sneaks into Asia's room and wakes her up just to borrow one of her dresses. Moments later, he takes the dress outside to aggressively practice his new magic trick, while Asia frantically rushes out trying to find him. In an absolute classic anime trope, she accidentally walks directly into the hitbox of Issei's magical attack. The next day, RIZZ gathers the squad for a massive lore dump, explaining the ancient server-wide war between angels, devils, and fallen angels that lasted for centuries. She adds that because devils have incredibly long lifespans, their spawn rates are mathematically super low. And because the Great War basically wiped out the entire player base, almost all the pure-blooded noble families were permanently deleted, leaving only top-tier guilds like Gremory, Citri, and Phoenix. To counter the massive population drop, devils created the reincarnation system to use humans as pawns, and the rating games were literally invented as a massive PvP arena for servants to grind real combat XP. After dropping that heavy exposition, RIZZ calls for a quick AFK break, and Issei immediately pulls Asia aside to aggressively apologize for accidentally hitting her with his magic last night. Surprisingly, Asia blushes and says the attack was actually kind of amazing, forcing Issei to frantically shush her and beg her to keep the incident off the server logs. Shortly after, RIZZ asks Asia to drop some intel from her previous class as a nun. So Asia explains the mechanics of how holy water and Bibles deal massive critical damage to devil players. However, she innocently complains that trying to read the Bible now gives her a massive debuff headache, prompting the squad to awkwardly remind her that demons literally cannot read holy texts. Later that night, Issei tries to sneak out for some solo grinding, but bumps directly into RIZZ, who casually mentions it's the perfect time for a strategy meeting. A few moments later, RIZZ confirms she's heavily theory crafting a team comp to counter the Phoenix Guild's broken mechanics. She then drops the devastating intel that RIZZ isn't just named after the legendary bird, he literally possesses its completely broken passive ability of absolute immortality. Completely shook, Issei asks if the devs actually allowed something that op in the game. And RIZZ grimly confirms that any damage dealt to RIZZ instantly auto-heals, giving him an insane competitive record of 8 wins and only 2 losses. But she adds the kicker, those 2 losses were against an allied guild, meaning RIZZ literally threw the matches on purpose. Because of this mathematically unbeatable stat check, RIZZ admits RIZZ is practically unkillable, making Issei feel incredibly guilty for pushing them into this unwinnable boss fight. However, RIZZ stops him, revealing her dad had already hard-coded this match into her schedule, fully expecting her to take the L. Genuinely curious, Issei asks why she's fighting so hard to avoid the engagement, and RIZZ trauma dumps that she's sick of being treated like a tradable NPC for her family's prestige, fiercely declaring she only wants to marry someone who actually mains her route. Without hesitation, Issei hits her with the ultimate RIZZ, claiming he'll always simp for her regardless of her guild ranking or tier. When he proudly declares himself her #1 fan, RIZZ is genuinely touched, hyping up the squad and declaring they are going to sweat this match and secure the W. Issei then drops his head, loudly complaining about his absolute trash tier stats holding the team back. So RIZZ warmly pulls him in, using her premium pillows to manually restore his confidence. The next day at the training grounds, RIZZ orders Issei to duel Yuto and strictly commands him to spam his boosted gear a full 12 times. After Issei successfully charges up, RIZZ explains that his base stats were way too low to handle that many buffs before the boot camp, proving his insane stat growth. Massively hyped by his new power level, Issei roars as RIZZ explains he can now maintain his DPS for way longer, and when Yuto rushes in for an attack, he gets completely violently repelled by Issei's aura. Right on cue, RIZZ commands Issei to completely unleash his charged mana pool. With a massive scream, Issei fires a devastating energy beam from his gauntlet that Yuto barely dodges, absolutely obliterating a massive chunk of the mountain behind him. Having completely drained his mana, Issei instantly collapses, and RIZZ turns to Yuto for a quick damage report. Yuto is completely shook, admitting Issei's raw burst damage was easily equivalent to a high-class Devil's ultimate. Asia rushes over to heal the exhausted MC, while RIZZ hypes him up, explaining his role is vital to their strategy and telling him to trust the squad. Fast forward to game day, Issei is sitting in his room locking in, replaying RIZZ's speech about showing the server the true power of the Gremory Guild, absolutely refusing to take an L today. Just then, Asia walks in fully equipped with her classic nun armor, explaining it gives her a massive comfort buff for the upcoming match. Issei gives her a thumbs up, telling her the skin looks absolutely peak on her. Asia then shyly asks to sit next to him, immediately clinging to his arm like a lifeline. While Issei internally panics, Asia admits she's incredibly nervous about the PvP event, but claims she'll be fine as long as he's in her party. When she softly asks if they can permanently co-op, Issei confidently promises they'll never disband their party. Right as the wholesome moment peaks, Issei's alarm blares, signaling it's time to log in and join the lobby. Gathered in the clubroom, Sona and Shinra casually walk in, and RIZZ explains that rating games are literally live-streamed to all the noble families, and Sona is acting as the official broadcaster. Suddenly, Grafia teleports into the room, announcing the countdown has started and they're about to be loaded into the arena. When Issei asks what the map looks like, Akino explains it's a completely isolated instance server, so they can cause absolute maximum destruction without catching a ban. Grafia then drops the pressure by announcing that Lucifer himself is currently watching the stream, and when RIZZ casually calls him brother, Issei completely loses his mind again. Yuto quickly fills him in, explaining Lucifer is the current Crimson Satan and absolute top ranker, which is why RIZZ is the official heir to the Gremory fortune. A few seconds later, the teleportation sequence initiates, dropping the squad into the battle zone. But to Issei's confusion, they're literally still standing inside the clubroom. Grafia's voice booms over the server comms, announcing she's the official game mod, explaining the map is an exact 1-1 replica of their high school, and looking out the window, they realize the sky is totally glitched out. The mod then details the win conditions. RIZZ's spawn point is the clubroom, while RIZZ's is the principal's office, and pawns can temporarily promote if they successfully infiltrate the enemy base. Hearing this broken mechanic, Issei instantly gets hyped to promote to Queen, but Akino shuts it down, warning him that the enemy team is definitely planning to rush their base too. Akino then hands out the squad's comms earpieces so they can coordinate their attacks across the map. While RIZZ arrogantly tells his massive harem squad to completely spawn kill them, RIZZ starts issuing tactical orders. She commands Yuto and Koniko to lock down the forest biome with traps, while she and Akino cast a massive illusion spell to mask the area. As the DPS units deploy, Issei asks what his and Asia's roles are, and RIZZ assigns them to backline support, ordering them to camp the spawn room with her. Taking a seat, RIZZ elegantly pats her lap and tells Issei to rest his head, completely catching him off guard, but he obeys and instantly enters pure nirvana. Overwhelmed by the premium service, Issei starts violently overreacting. RIZZ laughs, promising he can access this buff anytime, before stating she's about to manually remove a hidden debuff she cast on him, while Asia awkwardly watches. While Yuto and Koniko are busy setting up the minefield and Akino channels her massive illusion spell, RIZZ explains that when she first revived Issei, his base stats were way too weak to handle the power of 8 pawn pieces. To stop his account from corrupting, she literally had to lock away his power behind multiple firewalls. But since he's leveled up considerably, she casually unlocks the first few layers, and Issei instantly feels a massive surge of raw mana flood his system. RIZZ explains this is his true baseline power, noting that he needs his boosted gear and a maxed out physical defense just to contain the energy. She then intensely orders him to aggressively pack up any enemy player he encounters, even if they try to use their assets to distract him. Fully locked in, Issei promises to hard carry the team to victory. Moments later, Akino pings the team that the traps are fully operational, and RIZZ officially orders the squad to execute the master plan. As the match kicks off, Issei and Koniko push into the school gym and instantly encounter an enemy rook and 3 pawns, so Koniko takes aggro on the heavy hitter while Issei handles the mob. Meanwhile, 3 of RIZZ's pawns try to sneak into RIZZ's territory, but immediately trigger the proximity mines, forcing them to violently dodge the explosions. Back in the gym, Koniko barely dodges a heavy strike from a pawn named Xuelan, whose attack literally rips Koniko's clothes open, completely distracting Issei and allowing the enemy twins to successfully combo him into the floor. Instantly recovering, Koniko launches a brutal counterattack, successfully eliminating Xuelan from the match. At the same time, Issei is desperately kiting the evil twins, narrowly avoiding a critical strike from Myra, the 3rd enemy pawn. Hitting a flawless dodge roll, Issei spams his boosted gear, charging up for a massive AoE attack. Since the enemy refuses to surrender, Issei activates the highly questionable magic he practiced earlier, launching a spell that completely obliterates their armor. Absolutely hyped by his broken new meta, Issei proudly christens his ultimate move, the dress break. We then get a quick flashback, revealing he perfected this chaotic technique on Asia the night she accidentally walked into his line of fire. Seeing his completely degenerate combat style, Koniko sighs in pure disappointment, but when RIZZ pings for a status update, Issei confidently reports they are dominating their lane. RIZZ orders them to stick to the script, prompting Issei and Koniko to instantly tactical retreat from the gym. The second they clear the blast radius, Akino drops a massive orbital lightning strike, completely nuking the building and the remaining enemies inside, though RIZZ notes her ultimate is now on cooldown. RIZZ announces she's moving out to join the frontline once Akino's mana regenerates, telling the team to prep for Phase 2. Meanwhile, deep in RIZZ's territory, the 3 infiltrating pawns finally clear the minefield and spot the clubhouse. But as they approach, the building literally glitches out of existence, and Yuto casually drops from the trees, informing them they just walked straight into Akino's massive illusion trap. Completely unfazed, the enemy squad arrogantly asks if he seriously thinks he can 1v3 them, so Yuto just smirks and draws his sword. Cut to another part of the map, Koniko is ruthlessly scolding Issei for his absolute trash-tier combat style, but just as Issei walks ahead, a massive explosion rips through the area, scoring a direct hit on Koniko courtesy of Yubaluna, RIZZ's incredibly OP queen. Issei tries to rush in for the save, but it's too late. Koniko gets deleted and she's officially out of the game. Absolutely malding over losing his tank, Issei recklessly challenges Yubaluna to a 1v1, but RIZZ frantically pings his comms, ordering him to chill out since eliminated players just get sent to the recovery lobby. While Yubaluna arrogantly tells Issei to just log off because his stats are garbage, Akino majestically floats into the arena, telling Issei to tactically retreat while she handles the raid boss. As the 2 queens start charging their massive ultimate attacks, Issei regroups with Yuto, only to get the notification that Yuto just casually solo-wiped 3 enemy pawns. Taking a brief moment to mourn Koniko getting packed up, the duo locks in, swearing to absolutely sweat this match to avenge her. Right on cue, RIZZ drops the new strat over comms, announcing that she and Asia are going to stealth infiltrate the enemy base, officially ordering the boys to pull max aggro and cause a massive distraction. She explains this is their only viable win condition, since Akino is currently hard stuck in a 1v1, and the enemy team will never expect a backline rush. Following orders, Issei and Yuto march right up to the enemy's front gates and loudly spam the global chat, demanding they step outside. Instantly, RIZZ's knight, a baddie named Carlamine, spawns in and roasts them for being absolute idiots, openly feeding themselves to her blade. She draws her sword, and Yuto eagerly steps up to accept the duel, hyped to finally test his DPS against another high-tier knight. The absolute second they clash swords, the rest of the enemy guild drops their stealth camo and surrounds Issei, giving RIZZ and Asia the perfect window to sneak past the front line. Ready to throw hands, Issei activates his dragon gear, but notices RIZZ's little sister Ravel just standing in the backline refusing to engage. Before he can question it, RIZZ's second knight Isabella steps up to 1v1 him, leaving Issei deeply confused as to why the boss's little sister is even on the roster. In response, Isabella aggressively rushes him, explaining that Ravel is officially registered as the guild's bishop, acting purely as backline support. Processing this cursed law, Issei realizes RIZZ is an entirely different breed of degenerate if he literally recruited his own sister into his harem squad. Shaking off the brain rot, Issei focuses up, perfectly dodge-rolling Isabella's heavy strikes while waiting for his boosted gear to finish its cooldown. Suddenly, she catches him slipping with a brutal uppercut, which ironically gives his gauntlet the final charge it needed. Isabella smirks, noting his movement tech is way better than the last time he got brutally spawn-camped, and Issei proudly fires back that he got carried by the absolute best mentors. Meanwhile, in the night 1v1, Carlamine violently shatters Yuto's sword with her flaming blade, but Yuto just hits the "it is what it is" vibe and instantly spawns a brand new frost sword. The moment their weapons clash again, the elemental reaction completely extinguishes Carlamine's fire weapon. Not missing a beat, she quickly equips an offhand dagger and shatters the frost sword into pieces. But Yuto is literally playing with infinite ammo, instantly regenerating another cursed sword with a void core that casually absorbs all her incoming fire damage. Absolutely baffled, Carlamine asks how he equipped multiple sacred gears, and Yuto casually flexes that his base ability literally lets him craft infinite custom weapons on the fly. Popping his ultimate, he plunges his sword into the earth, summoning a massive field of blades to impale Carlamine, though she barely manages to dodge the AoE. Back with Issei, he gets distracted by the light show and eats another heavy punch, fully charging his gauge, so he fires a massive dragon wave point blank, but Isabella perfectly hits the evade button. Seeing his mana depleted, she rushes in for the execution, but Issei perfectly times his ultimate dress break technique, completely destroying her armor before blasting her out of the lobby. Just as Issei celebrates his W, he is shocked to see RIZZ and Asia casually land on the roof to confront RIZZ, realizing this was absolutely not part of the raid strat. While he's distracted, Ravel loudly brags about her family's broken immortality passive, as the remaining pawns start swarming Issei's position. Suddenly, the mob engages him, and while he frantically parries their attacks, he catches a glimpse of RIZZ taking heavy damage on the roof. But RIZZ barks over the comms, ordering him to focus on his own lane, so he flawlessly blocks an incoming strike and brutally dropkicks a pawn named Sirius. Knowing he needs to wipe the mob fast, Issei directly comms the Dragon Emperor inside his gauntlet, aggressively demanding a massive stat boost. Instantly, the sacred gear glows with intense heat, successfully unlocking its second stage evolution. Meanwhile, in the Queen 1v1, Aquino successfully knocks Ubeluna out of the sky, leaving both of them completely out of mana. But in an absolute toxic gamer move, Ubeluna pulls a max tier recovery potion from her inventory, chugs it, and smugly tells Aquino GG. Back on the ground, Issei checks out his sick new gauntlet skin, and urgently yells for Yuto to trigger his ultimate ability. Catching the play, Yuto violently stabs the ground, allowing Issei to channel his massive boosted mana directly into the sword's network. The massive energy surge triggers an absolute field wipe, spawning countless blades that brutally impale the entire remaining enemy frontline. Just as Issei starts popping off, Aquino's defeated avatar falls from the sky and despawns, giving RIZZ the perfect opportunity to loudly mock RIZZ for losing her highest DPS carry. To make things infinitely worse, Ubeluna snipes Yuto from across the map, completely enraging RIZZ, who fires a massive concentrated blast straight into RIZZ's chest. But his broken passive kicks in, instantly regenerating the damage, while Ravel praises Ubeluna, openly admitting they literally had to burn their potion cooldown just to survive Aquino. Hearing this absolute BS, Issei screams that they're using unauthorized hacks, but Ravel smugly points out that the rulebook allows 2 potions per match, arguing it balances out Asia's broken healing aura. Ignoring the toxic chat, Issei full sprints into the enemy base, successfully crossing the threshold and promoting his class to Queen. With his stats temporarily maxed out, he launches himself onto the roof to assist RIZZ, where Ubeluna arrogantly offers to 1v2 him and Asia. But RIZZ confidently steps up, claiming he'll pack them up himself. While RIZZ spams lethal fireballs at the squad, Asia continuously pumps healing magic into Issei, but out of nowhere, they get blindsided by a massive explosion from Ubeluna. Luckily, Issei acts as a meat shield and tanks the hit, surviving with minimal HP, though the shockwave completely knocks Asia unconscious. Observing this, RIZZ deduces Issei must have gained the massive defensive buffs of a Queen promotion to survive that nuke. With their only healer offline, Issei and RIZZ lock in, deciding to make one final desperate push. But the absolute second Issei boosts his gear and charges RIZZ, his avatar completely glitches out and collapses, his physical stats utterly depleted from the overexertion. Refusing to stay down, Issei violently forces himself back up, literally coughing up blood as he tries to keep his character model from despawning. Seeing him vulnerable, RIZZ aggressively pushes the advantage, delivering an absolute brutal beatdown while screaming at Issei to just hit the forfeit button. Because Issei's main character syndrome refuses to let him quit, RIZZ grabs him by the skull, charging a lethal attack to permanently wipe him from the server. Unable to watch her pawn get executed, RIZZ frantically tackles RIZZ, officially hitting the resign button and ending the match. A few days later, while logged out in a coma, Issei hears the Dragon Emperor's voice in his dream, aggressively roasting him for being a total scrub and warning him his destined rival is going to laugh at him. When Issei asks who this mysterious rival is, the Emperor cryptically drops the law that he'll meet him eventually, since their ultimate PvP showdown is literally hard-coded into destiny. The Emperor strictly tells Issei he needs to grind his stats massively, offering to lend him his absolute raw power whenever he's ready. Right then, the massive dragon fully renders into the dream space, formally introducing himself as D-Drake. After the cutscene ends, Issei violently wakes up in his bed, only to find Grafia casually standing in his room like an NPC quest giver. Highly confused, Issei demands to know Ria's status, and Grafia solemnly confirms they officially took the L because Ria's forfeited the match to save his life. As the lag clears and his memories load back in, Issei remembers Ria's crying over his battered body, praising his effort. Completely devastated, he bursts into tears, aggressively blaming his massive skill issue for costing them the game. When he asks for a status check on the guild, Grafia explains Asia has been acting as his personal nurse, while the rest of the squad was forcibly transferred to the underworld to attend Ria's. Hearing they are literally at the engagement party right now, Issei remembers Ria's crying that she just wanted real love, making him absolutely despise his own weakness. Grafia coldly states that Ria's is simply fulfilling her family's main questline, but Issei aggressively pushes back, crying that this is a forced ending she never wanted. Surprisingly impressed, Grafia notes that Issei is a refreshingly honest player who wears his heart on his sleeve, and casually drops the absolute nuke that his performance actually caught Lucifer's attention, handing him a VIP teleportation ticket directly to the wedding venue. Issei asks if she's just inviting him to sit in the audience like a cuck. But Grafia smirks, revealing Lucifer is literally inviting him to crash the wedding and steal the bride. Issei snatches the ticket, and as Grafia despawns, Asia bursts into the room. Absolutely overjoyed to see his HP finally restored, she tackle hugs him, crying that she thought his account was permanently banned. After apologizing for making his healer stress, Issei confidently declares he's logging back in to rescue his guild master. Asia instantly volunteers to co-op the mission, but Issei gently tells her he needs to solo this specific boss fight. He asks her to run a quick fetch quest for him, and once she leaves, he immediately summons D-Drake to negotiate a highly illegal stat boost. Meanwhile, in the underworld server, RIZZ is fully equipped in her wedding armor, looking absolutely miserable as RIZZ struts in playing the perfect groom. Once he leaves, RIZZ stares blankly, remembering the absolute panic she felt when Issei's HP almost hit 0. Out in the main lobby, Ravel is loudly bragging about her brother sweeping the tournament, while Sona politely congratulates the Gremory squad for massively exceeding everyone's expectations. But the squad just hits her with a smirk, hinting the match isn't officially over. Right on cue, RIZZ spawns on the main stage to deliver his arrogant victory speech. But the absolute second he summons RIZZ to the altar, Issei violently kicks the double doors open, marching into the lobby radiating pure Black Air Force energy, loudly declaring that RIZZ's V-card belongs exclusively to him. Instantly, the server guards swarm him, but his loyal guildmates brutally pack them up, creating a clear path and telling him to push the objective. While the NPC guests completely freak out, Lucifer majestically teleports into the room, smoothly announcing this was just a little surprise event he scripted. Turning to RIZZ, Lucifer admits the rating game was fun, but completely unbalanced, claiming he wanted a much more hype finale for his sister's wedding, specifically requesting to see Issei's dragon powers in action. So the server admin officially announces a 1v1 duel between the dragon and the phoenix, asking Issei what loot he wants if he secures the W. With the ultimate blank check in front of him, Issei instantly demands RIZZ's freedom. Moments later, they load into the PvP arena, and as they aggressively charge each other, Issei instantly pops his queen promotion and overclocks his sacred gear past its safe limits. Accessing completely forbidden developer commands, he triggers a massive transformation sequence, equipping a full set of S-tier dragon armor. We get a quick flashback showing Issei made a highly toxic deal with D-Drake, trading a piece of his humanity to unlock this ultimate form for exactly 10 seconds. With his stats completely maxed out, he perfectly matches RIZZ blow for blow. However, even with the insane buffs, Issei still takes heavy tick damage as RIZZ endlessly spams his hellfire attacks. As Issei starts violently bleeding out, RIZZ begins his toxic trash talk, but randomly coughs up a massive amount of blood himself. Completely undetected, Issei had secretly equipped the holy crucifix he fetched from Asia, using it to bypass RIZZ's immortality. Absolutely baffled by the critical damage, RIZZ demands to know where he got top-tier holy gear, and Issei smoothly replies he just borrowed it from his personal healer. Realizing the cross isn't burning Issei, RIZZ accurately deduces that Issei permanently sacrificed his left arm to the Dragon Emperor to negate the holy damage. Issei fiercely yells that losing an arm is a massive steal if it means saving RIZZ, recklessly charging in for the final blow. Tragically, his 10-second buff violently expires, causing him to crash into the ground while desperately trying to negotiate an extension with D-Drake. Just as D-Drake confirms there's a tiny sliver of mana left in the gauntlet, RIZZ brutally grabs Issei by the throat, preparing to execute him. But in the ultimate Beitan switch, Issei pulls out a flask of pure holy water and violently smashes it directly into RIZZ's face. The holy AoE completely extinguishes RIZZ's flames, severely nerfing his stats and leaving him screaming in absolute agony. Malding with rage, RIZZ summons his last remaining embers for a desperate counterattack. But Issei flawlessly hits the dodge roll, perfectly applying the movement tech he grinded with Koniko. Channeling every last drop of mana into his gauntlet, Issei locks onto RIZZ's critical weak point. Just before Issei can unleash the lethal strike, Ravel frantically rushes onto the arena to body block the attack and save her brother. That's when Lucifer calls GG, the duel is over, and he dips as the entire arena starts to despawn. As Issei's character model goes limp and falls, Koniko catches him, but immediately yeets the degenerate straight into RIZZ's arms before he can try any funny business. Shortly after, Graphia spawns a literal griffin mount and tasks Issei with safely escorting RIZZ back to their home server. So the duo hops on and initiates fast travel. Mid-flight, RIZZ gently scolds Issei, calling him an absolute idiot for permanently sacrificing his arm stats just to save her. Before softly dropping the hint that since her toxic engagement is officially cancelled, her romance route is completely wide open for a new player. But because he literally has the main character syndrome density of a black hole, the idiot completely misses the hint, swearing he'll just keep sacrificing body parts to save her, prompting RIZZ to reward his loyalty with a massive kiss. She then drops the ultimate W, announcing she's officially moving into his lobby. So do you guys think Issei actually has the stats to build an S-tier harem? Drop your tier lists and thoughts down in the comments below.